Hey there, Scorpio, and welcome to your 2026 year ahead horoscope. We will look at the major shifts and changes that you'll be experiencing in the coming year by looking at the planets of Jupiter through Pluto, as well as the way that the eclipses are going to be shifting in your chart in this coming year. And this is for Scorpio rising, especially because then all of these placements will align correctly with the whole sign houses in your chart. But you can definitely check this out for Scorpio sun as well. So this is a very special year, largely due to the alignment that I have showing on screen here, which is going to take place in late July, where we have all of the outer planets lined up perfectly at 4 degrees each. So Pluto's going to be at 4 degrees of Aquarius, Neptune at 4 degrees of Aries, Uranus at 4 degrees of Gemini, and Jupiter at 4 degrees of Leo as well. And so they are forming this basket configuration, which is very beautiful, but it speaks to me of something of a calling. It's calling certain people to action, and especially those who have placements or planets around 4 degrees of any sign, because then at this point, that placement is going to be activated by all of these different energies at once. So these kinds of alignments just straight up do not happen. This is the first time that we've seen anything like this. So if you want to check and see if you have any placements around 4 degrees, you can do that by casting your chart at astro.com or astroseek.com. Of course, I can also look into that for you. I do year ahead readings and natal readings and have made a habit of preparing people with 4-degree placements for this lineup. But with that said, in this video, we're going to go through all of these different alignments that are going to be taking place in the houses of your chart. So we'll discuss these real quick. I'll just set them out and then we'll go through and we'll delineate each of them. And as we delineate each of them, we'll also speak to how these are reinforcing each other. So all of these alignments will be supportive of each other or reinforcing the energy. So we'll discuss how that is also taking place with these alignments in your chart in the coming year. We also have a major alignment of Saturn and Neptune coming up this year, which is the Saturn-Neptune Conjunction. And that's going to be taking place at 0 degrees of Aries in your 6th house. And that will be going exact on the 20th of February of 2026. And that'll be just after Neptune enters your 6th house on the 26th of January of 2026. And also just after Saturn enters this house by moving into Aries on the 14th of February of 2026. And as I said, they will conjoin exactly on the 20th of February, but they will also remain in this sign all year. So they are going to continue to commingle and work with each other's energies as long as Saturn remains in this sign as well, which it will do until about the spring of 2028. Neptune, in turn, will stay in this house until 2038, 2039. So we have a long time of that. We also have Uranus will be moving into your 8th house this year when it moves into Gemini on the 26th of April of 2026, and it will remain there as well beyond the end of the year, all the way through to about 2032, 2033. Jupiter will also enter your 10th house when it moves into Leo on the 30th of June of 2026 and will remain there beyond the end of the year into the June-July timeframe in 2027. So it'll be there for a full year from summer 26 to summer 27. Pluto will be in your 4th house all year. It moved into Aquarius off and on for the past couple years. It's staying there finally now for the entire year, but it's a very important placement. It's going to be relevant each year to varying degrees, especially this year due to all of these alignments that are reinforcing its position there. So we'll go ahead and run back through that and remind us what that's going to be speaking to this year as well for you. Additionally, the eclipses are going to be reinforcing the placements of Jupiter and Pluto here. And the reason for that is that the nodal axis, the north node and south node, they run retrograde. And they've been in Pisces with the north node and Virgo with the south node for some time. And they've been creating eclipses in Pisces and Virgo since the autumn of 2024. Now, we will still get our lunar eclipses in those signs. We will get a lunar eclipse in Virgo on March 3rd of 2026, and we'll get a lunar eclipse in Pisces on August 28th of 2026. But because of the fact that the nodal axis will be shifting, going retrograde backward North Node into Aquarius, South Node into Leo, we'll be getting our solar eclipses this year along the Aquarius-Leo axis. So we'll get a solar eclipse in Aquarius on the 17th of February of 2026, and we will get a solar eclipse, a long-term, actually, a very big deal total solar eclipse in Leo on the 12th of August of 2026 as well. So we'll speak to that and how that's reinforcing the alignment of Jupiter and Pluto in this year. So with that said, let's go ahead and delineate all of this. We'll start with the placements that we have in Aries, the first sign of the zodiac. Those two will be in your 6th house. And that conjunction of Saturn and Neptune is speaking to the dissolving of old structures. This can test our faith. It can cause us to reality test the area that it's speaking to in our life. There's a lot of healing, releasing, reimagining, as well as a lot of discipline that's being brought to the house that this is conjoining in. And for you, that is going to be your 6th house, which speaks to matters of routine, of your activity, the things that you have to do from day to day. This is your organization, how it is that you work with other people, how it is that you are of service to other people. We can also see certain people show up here, coworkers, subordinates, people that you work with, team members. But this does also speak to health. And so the healing aspect of Saturn and Neptune, as it peels away layers of confusion, layers of denial, layers of doubt, layers of fear that are unnecessary, that are untrue, what you're left with is a core truth, something of a major reality there. We'll speak to the health aspect of this first, and then we'll go into the activity aspect of the 6th house. So this can be speaking to concrete realizations, very helpful and practical realizations or understanding of your health status, where you're at with certain things. This can have you taking that very seriously. So you may be starting some sort of a regimen to try to improve your health, especially if you've identified any complicated areas. Now, I do have to say on the front end of that conjunction, especially when it's going exact, etc., like right in that February, March timeframe, there might be a bit of fogginess around that. And that may be part of the catalyst of taking that all really seriously then. Maybe there's some confusion. Maybe there's a test result that's kind of weird. Maybe there is this confusing kind of a symptom. What's strange about that is that I wouldn't be surprised if Saturn and Neptune would throw up a flag that just points something out that isn't quite as extreme as you may think it is. Again, this may just be some symptoms that cause you to look at something that cause you, therefore, to take that aspect of your health more seriously. So I would be getting second opinions, taking tests again, anything like that, if there is something confusing that comes up in that area. But what I would expect for this to be speaking to even more so is any sort of emotional or psychological or spiritual health questions that you have. There can be issues of boundaries in the 6th house. Again, this is where we can become of service to others. You may find when these move into that place, again, there's a little bit of confusion on the front end of that, where you're doing all this work and other people don't seem to be holding up their end. And then there's all these questions that arise around, why am I doing this? This can point out where maybe some of those boundaries have been a bit porous. So you may need to make very clear to yourself and others, what are your limitations? What are you willing to take on? What is your responsibility and what is the responsibility of other people? There's going to be a lot that's going on with this alignment throughout the whole year around your sense of duty. That's likely to be really strong in this coming year. But we can't fulfill our own duties if we're trying to take care of absolutely everything. Especially the way that that's going to be playing into Jupiter moving into your 10th house this year. That Jupiter will trine that Neptune, as we see on screen here, but it's also going to be trining that Saturn in your 6th house as well. And so there may be this desire to show up really well, do your work super well, produce quality results. And absolutely, you may be doing that for the recognition. Maybe you're looking for a promotion. You're looking to advance. You're following your ambitions, something along these lines. But again, try to keep some notion in the fore about what are my limitations here? What is it that I'm willing to do? What is reasonable for me to do here? So that aspect of health also very much plays in with this house. What are you expecting of yourself? And if you find yourself pushing yourself to burnout, maybe there's an underlying emotional or psychological layer to that you need to peel back and look at. Try not to be overly self-sacrificial during this year, basically, is what I'm trying to get at. Now, on the activity front here, on the work front here, again, especially in the beginning of the year when we don't have those trines to Jupiter quite yet, when Saturn and Neptune are still trying to figure out what is the crux of the issue here? What is it that we're going to be working on? There may be some outdated belief systems or notions or narratives around good hard work. If you just put in the good hard work, if you're just of service, you're doing your due diligence, you're taking care of everything, the quality is superb, then everything's going to be fine and you're going to be rewarded for that. And then maybe you get overlooked for something. And there's that level of frustration there. And there's this question maybe around a mismatch of that sense of responsibility between perhaps a job or a boss and you. Maybe you are pouring your heart into your work and you're not seeing the results that you should be for that. I would not overly fret about that. Those kinds of things that come up, all of those questions around work and is it worth it and why am I putting in so much effort and so on, especially around that February, March timeframe that winds up coming up, it's trying to point something very real out to you. It's trying to get you to reformulate and re-narrativize what is truly motivating to you, what is truly a priority to you when it comes to your activity and your work patterns and things like this. And if you're able to work through, again, all those questions about boundaries and what's worth it, what are your priorities, and you're setting these things for yourself. You're basing them on not what's expected of you, but what's true to you. What's wonderful about that is that once you get to that core of the issue there, what is really important, what is very much real for you, not for the company, not necessarily for the people that you feel you were of service to, but what's really true for you about what you put your energy and your effort into and why you do, what motivates you to do so. Then you're able to lean into the Neptune aspect here, which is the dream. It's the idealization. It's how do I want for this area of my life to look? So what is it that you want to put your effort and activity and energy and heart and spirit into? What do you want to be of service to? What's really cool about Saturn conjoining that Neptune and then moving off of it through the year is that it's going to be taking that ideal, taking that dream, taking that vision about what you want to put your energy into, and it's going to help you to make that real, to ground that into reality, to bring that into form so that that is what you're putting your energy and your heart and soul into, your activity into, so that you're not continually in this state of, well, it doesn't matter what I want to put my energy into. I live in a world where I have to make money, I have to pay the bills, and so I just need to do what's expected of me. This conjunction calls that completely into question. Now, there's effort that's required with regard to that, but fortunately, there's so much discipline and a belief-centered discipline, which is kind of difficult to shake when you're dealing with that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. When it's working with material that's very real, as well as realistic ideals, there's very little that it can't set in stone, including perhaps for you in this coming year, some notions around independent work or being able to call your own shots when it comes to the activity, the duties that you are required to do. Focus throughout, again, especially once you get beyond the kind of confusion and stuff like that, the questions getting thrown up in February and March, really focusing this year on building a new long-term vision about your activity and your working life, your routines. What kind of lifestyle do you want? Grounding those ideals into practical frameworks where you're able to look at that, try to look out into the future of how might that come about, and then utilize that Saturn to set out, how do I take those steps to get there? And the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, I personally have seen, can help a lot with that, even in the ether, where there are opportunities that wind up coming through when you're ready for them and when you're willing to put your effort into them in order to help you out to get there, in order to help you out with that plan, possibly even speeding it up a bit. So there's a lot of opportunities here for healing any sort of ego attachments to outdated notions and narratives and structures around what's required of you, what's expected of you, who you need to be of service to, etc. And then being able to structure your life with sensitivity and with a notion of a mature compassion for what you feel is genuinely meaningful action for you to be taking, to create sustainable routines that are disciplined, but that are also supportive of your well-being. But again, it's going to require some releasing of weakened boundaries around signing up, saying, yes, I'll do that for you, to the point of exhaustion at times. It will also require some releasing of notions around authority. And I'm not saying don't do what your boss says or to uproot things like that. But just because someone is in a position of authority doesn't mean that they necessarily know how things should be done. I feel like a lot of us, or more and more of us each year, have an understanding of that. This is going to be quite supportive of that understanding as well. Creating that direction, creating that notion of what you should be putting your energy into for yourself, being that authority for yourself. Also releasing any sort of perfectionism. So both of these can be a bit perfectionistic. Neptune is reaching for an ideal. It would love for it to look exactly the way it does in that vision that it has. Everything will always fall short of a perfect, idealized, platonic ideal, right? What it is that we're wanting. But rather than being able to create those boundaries for ourselves around what is good enough. Now, on a psychological level, there may be a bit of guilt around this, especially around setting boundaries if you haven't quite up until this point. There's also this very strengthened notion around responsibility and maturity when it comes to your duties. I don't doubt that you're going to be doing very, very quality work through this period of time, but it will also require some level of patience with yourself, and that reminding yourself that discipline needs to be sustainable. We do need, when we're dealing with Saturn can struggle a bit with how long things take when it's in Aries, but we do need to sustain that energy. So we can't be going 100% all the time, basically. But also then leaning into the imagination. What do you want your day-to-day life to look like? What do you want your activities to look like? What do you want your health to look like? Your lifestyle. Idealizing around that and allowing for yourself to idealize around that. The sixth house can struggle a bit with that kind of a thing, especially when you have your sixth house with Aries there. It's like, let's just get down to brass tacks. Let's just get it done. But sometimes we need to ask those bigger questions, and we can save ourselves a lot of time and effort, in fact, by asking those bigger questions around, is it worth it? Is this really a priority? What is the priority? And then that can make more efficient and more effective your kind of attack plan with Aries there around, how do I make this, my day-to-day, look more the way that I want for it to, and not just pushing through each day. So yeah, just watching out for fatigue, again, burning yourself out a bit, that confusion on the front end, that is natural. It's going to be a process of what that's doing is releasing. That's the releasing point. It's through that release, and then through letting Neptune work with the material that's left over, and then letting Saturn run with that we're able to crystallize that ideal, that new ideal into form, and allow for that disillusionment to happen around your duties and things like this, and what's paying off and what's a priority. Disillusionment is a gift. It takes away illusion so that what we're able to work with is reality. So that's a lot of what Saturn and Neptune are going to be working on here. We'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about Jupiter, because this triad here is quite important. 6th house, 10th house. These two are going to be working together quite well when it comes to your working life. So Uranus is also going to be moving into your 8th house. And Uranus brings a quality of innovation, freedom, disruption, acceleration, awakening, things like this. We can experience sudden breakthroughs and quantum leaps when we're dealing with Uranus. And in your 8th house, this is speaking to the area of life that has to do with dependencies, people's dependencies upon you and vice versa, both codependencies or complications, as well as interdependencies or mutually beneficial connections. This can speak to matters of trust of other people, where your resources and others commingle. So sometimes we can see contracts here, or people that we share our financial lives with. Business partners can show up here, but also emotional security is a major theme here. So emotional entanglements can show up. Where is it that we are looking for affirmation from others rather than trying to root our sense of value within ourselves? We can also, in my view, very much run into psychological themes of how we relate to others and any sort of shadow aspects of that. So again, the codependent tendencies and things like that tend to show up in the eighth house, but also subtle or extreme manipulations, things like that can also show up here, control issues. So there's a lot of different aspects that go into this, but fundamentally it is about our material and emotional security with regard to our relationships. So there's likely to be a lot of really rapid change or those sudden breakthroughs, those aha moments with regard to who it is that you share resources with. And when I say that, also debts, any sort of contract you've signed on to, taxes, things like that can also show up here. If you work with clients, especially if you work with the money of clients or the resources of others, that can also show up here quite a bit. And there may be some breakthrough moments that come through with that. And some of them will be straightforwardly very helpful, will help to make this area of life a lot clearer than it typically would be. But there can also be realizations that hit in a way that we don't naturally love, but are still very helpful, have a huge silver lining because they're revealing something to us that's helpful to know. Maybe we want to make a change then. Maybe we want to free ourselves up. Maybe specifically in the eighth house, we want to feel liberated from any sort of control or dependencies, power dynamics with regard to resources, particularly anyone who has anything over your head, basically, that's likely to feel really intolerable through this period of time. And that may, if you try to sweep that under the rug, if you try not to deal with that, Uranus is likely to put that right in your face and show you why that's a problem. And it can do that through these little moments of crises or urges to free yourself up from those things. There can also be awakening moments or in moments of enlightenment around intimacy and trust and maybe issues along those lines. Maybe you're recognizing who you can trust. Maybe someone is surprising you by really showing up and being there for you. Maybe there's someone that you know that you're not thinking about, oh, I have this resource of this friend that I know who happens to know of a really wonderful opening that is enabling me to connect with a better opportunity in my working life or something like this. Or maybe they know someone who is a really wonderful contractor and they're going to help me to renovate my home in a way that if you didn't know them, if you didn't have that resource you weren't quite thinking about, you might not have had that connection then. So surprise resources can wind up coming through here. It's not just rude awakenings. There are really wonderful awakenings here as well. There can also be little windfalls, not realizing that you had resources owed to you. Maybe there is a tax rebate or a tax credit that you weren't thinking about and you've had the same withholding. Maybe this is a bigger than expected tax return or something like this. Now, it can go the other way, so that's always worth keeping in mind, but it can be on that positive side as well, without a doubt. Maybe this is a reawakening of a sense of intimacy. If you've been focusing a lot on duty and just nose to the grindstone, getting things done, and you haven't been as connected, especially in one-on-one relationships with people recently, this could be that kind of reconnection where you're able to share of yourself and others are sharing of you. Now, one kind of funny way that that can go with Uranus in the 8th house, you may at times, for sure, encounter kind of disturbed psyches at times. So people may like trauma dump on you, or they may behave very strangely. These can be catalysts as well for not wanting to be overly dependent upon other people. It's because people can surprise us for sure. So I wouldn't be going all in on trust immediately when it comes to people, but Uranus may want to do things, especially Uranus and Gemini, may want to do so in a rapid way. It does bring that acceleration. So in an accelerated way, jumping deeply into a connection with someone and then realizing, oh, this isn't quite what I thought that I was dealing with here, and then needing to reel that back, step out of that situation. Now, on the positive side, if that were to happen, this Uranus is going to give you way more than enough impetus to liberate yourself from any situation like that. And that would just kind of need to be chalked up to, okay, Uranus gave you a bit of a lesson about rushing into things. This could also be awakening in you some fascination with a research topic or a psychological topic. Maybe you're wanting to dig into things that are a bit esoteric or a bit complex, and they really require a lot of focused effort to understand more deeply, but you're really fascinated by it, so you're willing to put that in. It's likely that this would be more of that kind of either hidden things, so investigating something, or understanding like financial power, things like that, psychological complexes and power dynamics and things like this, esoteric topics. So maybe mediumship is suddenly fascinating to you, or like near-death experiences or something like this, where you're trying to understand something and you're really fascinated by something that's difficult to understand. This is also really wonderful for accelerated shadow work. So you could have some really strong breakthroughs in healing, especially psychological healing, and especially psychological questions with regard to relating to others. So again, the codependency or looking outside of yourself for validation, things like this. Perhaps inherited patterns as well. Uranus is going to figure out that pattern quite quickly, and it may just serve it to you on a platter suddenly, where there's that, again, that aha moment of, oh, wow, this is a pattern that I'm picking up on from my mother because she picked up on it from her mother, etc. And then suddenly feeling liberated to make different decisions, to create different patterns for yourself as well. Now, one thing also I would say, hate to say this because I know this is kind of unsettling, but I wouldn't be shy to create a habit. If you don't check in on your bank accounts and things like that regularly, it might be wise to just kind of do so. Check your statements, make sure that there's not any unauthorized charges or things like that. Uranus in Gemini is going to be speaking to AI. Eighth house can be the money that you have in the bank. This probably wouldn't be a cash on hand kind of a situation. It would probably be something in an institution. So just checking in on those statements. I don't want to freak you out about that at all, but it is a possibility. And maybe if you catch it earlier, then that would be better. Maybe your bank will catch it as well and inform you of something like that. If there are any extra safeguards that you're able to put in place as well, maybe you can do that before this moves into that place, and maybe you can avoid some of those things. There may also be some surprising investment opportunities. Uranus in Gemini isn't going to tell us whether or not that's going to go well or not. So definitely utilize your own judgment when it comes to those things, but I would expect at least 2 pretty significant investment opportunities to open up. Maybe not this year, but in the coming 7 years or so that we have Uranus there. So there's a lot of opportunities here for embracing a sense of freedom and authenticity when it comes to your emotional security, not feeling the need to root that in others, and then therefore through the removal of the dependency aspect there, possibly codependency aspect there, being able to develop intimacy and trust on a stronger, freer kind of a basis, to where there's not as much neediness, there's not as many strings attached, there's not as many like ego attachments to people fulfilling certain roles for you. Also reframing narratives around independence and interdependency, around trust, taking new perspectives on that. Not to mention, again, studying psychology might be kind of cool to do through this period of time. You may be a bit more fascinated by it, and you could wind up just through studying those things, experience a huge amount of enlightenment about other people and how they relate as well, how people generally speaking relate to each other, and maybe some of the things to watch for when it comes to people's shadows or ego attachments, things like that. Some things to watch out for here, again, impulsiveness or instability in intimate connection. So try your best if you can, if you're not partnered up and you meet someone that's quite fascinating, to not go all in on like day 2 or 3. Try to give things time to allow for that intimacy and that trust to develop over time. Also paying attention to emotional volatility, not just in yourself, but also in others. So looking for those little signs, those little red flags, try to heed those. If you don't, The thing is that Uranus is going to be very aware of the fact that you're not paying attention, and it may turn up the volume to such a point that you're not able to ignore it. Also, beware of control issues and any little shocks that come along there. Again, Uranus is trying to free you up, and this is a place where we can get tied down. So I would not expect for it to be this long-term grinding kind of a lesson where super entangled and it's a big mess that's going to take years or something like this. But you may have those one-off weird little experiences around control issues, power struggles, things like that, where Uranus is trying to make a point about that for you. So those are some things to kind of pay attention for there. Additionally, if there is some moment coming up this year around a new, maybe better, maybe more ideal work opportunity or career path that opens up to you, that is presented to you as an opportunity, make sure you're reading all of the documents. Try to make sure that there's not a too good to be true kind of element to that. If there is something along the lines of commissions, there may be some surprises about the actual value of that. Try to really get things in writing. Try to make sure that you are reading everything that you're signing, because this can go either way. This can be wonderful. It can feel like it's too good to be true, but it is. This could be, again, someone who knows of a absolutely wonderful work opportunity and they tell you about it, and it winds up being a lot more lucrative than you expected for it to be. Maybe it's even pointing out to you skills and talents and things like this that you're bringing to the table that you didn't quite know that you had. So it can be wonderful, but it can also be not what you're expecting, either on that positive side or on the side of, okay, here's a little bit of a lesson about going too idealistic and not crossing your T's and dotting your I's about certain things. So speaking of this Jupiter up in your 10th house, this is a really wonderful transit. This is one that, as people who tend to care about how our life is unfolding and our future is unfolding, what our life path is, we tend to love. This is one of the more significant Jupiter transits that we will experience in a 12-year cycle. And so Jupiter transits tend to speak to a lot of benefit that we can derive in a certain area, breakthroughs, opportunities. We tend to get a lot of yeses and support in the area of life that's being highlighted by that Jupiter transit. Things can just go a lot more smoothly than expected, and we can have a sense of much greater growth or more rapid growth than we're expecting in that area as well. The 10th house has to do with if you have a typical career path, like a traditional career, speaking quite directly to that, but it is also speaking more broadly to your life direction, your public role, your public life, your reputation, your legacy, your ambition, your status. So this transit speaks to public success and recognition with regard to your career path, especially with this in Leo. It's going to be speaking to a lot of courage, creativity, joy with your career. So loving what you do, especially when it's tying into that Neptune in the 6th house. There can be this romanticization, again, the idealization of your work and your ability to inspire others through your leadership. So not only are you showing up very well, but receiving recognition for it, and possibly even being able to twist and turn that career path for you, or maybe your role or your position, in a more creatively satisfying kind of a direction as well. Even if you have a corporate career position, this could have you doing it in a very unique way that's getting noticed. This is you doing it your way, tied with the Aries Neptune, which is very individualistic. This is my idea. This is my vision of how things can go. And then that Jupiter and Leo, that kind of charisma and radiance and optimism, enthusiasm for doing things also in a very independent and unique kind of a way as well. So there's a lot about you and how you approach things that's coming off super well, and that you should be able to benefit from a lot in this coming year. Now, this can also thrust you into a more visible role as well with Leo there. Leo tends to take the stage, take the spotlight. And so recognition is a lot easier when people are paying attention to the good work that you're doing. Remember how I was mentioning a bit earlier in the year, if you're a bit frustrated about, I'm putting all this effort in and I don't feel like it's getting recognized. As we get into Jupiter moving into the 10th house and aligning with these placements in Leo, that should not be an issue. And what that shift is speaking to is that there's some kind of personal growth, personal expansion, possibly even a sense of healing through personal improvement and development and growth of your higher mind, of your understanding, of your knowledge, of your wisdom, taking yourself and your personal growth quite seriously in the past year as Jupiter's been moving through Cancer and the ninth house, which it's going to be wrapping up in this year before it moves into your 10th. Making sure that internally, and when it comes to the bringing to bear the knowledge, the experience, then to that public role that you're carrying, that's what is especially supportive of you, is the confidence in knowing that you've been preparing to show up in this year. So it is specifically the confidence, the charisma, the creative vision that is going to be inspiring people and that should be opening a lot of doors for you. So that positive attitude, big-heartedness, generosity, being willing to take people under your wing as well, mutually supportive relationships, the way that that's tied into that Neptune and Aries, where you are wanting to be a good influence, to be in a sense of service even to your coworkers, to your team. There is that healthy or unhealthy, potentially, self-sacrificial quality of doing it for the team, like wanting to show up well, wanting to support the cause that you're all working toward, but therefore through that inspiration that you're able to provide to other people by being there for each other, you're making a really good impression as well. So there should be a huge amount of benefit for you in that kind of kindness that you're able to show through affirming others, in addition to affirming yourself and having that confidence in yourself. This is also highly supportive of taking creative risks with your work and your career as well, showing up really boldly. Maybe there's some like presentations, things like that. Again, a more visible kind of an aspect to your role that you may be stepping into in this year that should also go over quite well. Just make sure, of course, that you are very well prepared for that. If you see anything like that on the horizon, utilize this period of time where you still have Jupiter in that ninth house, which is preparing you to take that stage. Can you study any courses around public speaking, around presentation, to give yourself that confidence of knowing that you're ready? So there's a huge amount of opportunity here around strengthening your self-belief, your independence, your ability to stand out among the crowd, your ability to lead, not just in this self-serving way, but in a way that is genuinely helpful, that is genuinely inspiring to those around you. So this is a natural transit, especially since you have your 10th house with Leo there, to put you into a leadership position. This is also, again, I want to reiterate, especially because of this trine between that Neptune in your 6th and this Jupiter in your 10th, the creative vision, that boldness, that joy, that warmth, that play that you're able to experience through your working life as well, that creative fulfillment that you're able to infuse into your working life, he's also going to make it much more enjoyable for you to be doing that. So it's this kind of self-fulfilling cycle that you can get into, which is really, really wonderful. Very well supported here. It should be, especially if you're really emotionally honest with yourself about how you're wanting to show up and what you're bringing to the table and what you're capable of and so on, and that you're willing to make some shifts and changes and tap into some resources, maybe reach out to people if you don't feel fulfilled in a specific role, or you know that there's not going to be adequate recognition in a certain role. Being able to be honest with yourself about that that's something that is important to you and that you want to be in those mutually supportive and warm environments where you are able to have this kind of creative vision and then pursuing that. This should give you a huge amount of support to push you in that direction. But paramount to all of this is going to be your own optimism, your own confidence that things are going to work out well. Also, this kind of moral ideal. So doing things with integrity, personal Leo, personal integrity. So this should be a year where you feel like you're able to expand and grow in your career or your life direction or your status, feel very successful in this year, to feel very fortunate in the way that things are playing out and unfolding for you. You may even feel that there are some destined connections that are coming through, destined doors that are opening for you. Some things to watch for, though, are going to be around any sort of excess or complacency, of course, overconfidence, but I would lean into the optimism as well. Additionally, this can be quite competitive, and it can wind up leaning on the facade or the superficial performance rather than the productivity but it can also still burn you out even when you are focused on the productivity, if you're trying to go 100% all the time, like we discussed a bit earlier. So there is a risk of that. Again, check in on your energy levels, check in on whether you're taking on responsibilities that very much shouldn't be yours and won't benefit you or others for you to be taking on. And then watch out for that kind of competition a bit. Now, additionally, with that Jupiter in Leo, there may be people around you as well. Maybe this is family. Maybe it's just people who are a bit closer to home. It could show up, strictly speaking, within a work environment, but there could be people who try to cut you down a bit, who try to undermine your confidence, who try to say certain things that are going to like knock you off your high horse, even if you're not up on a high horse. Your success may be triggering to people. For one thing, I mean, it may even be triggering to yourself on certain levels. So try not to do that to yourself. If that's something that you know that you do, again, that's part of that emotional honesty of try not to self-sabotage your own success in this year. Especially, again, if there are any patterns that you've recognized around family that does that, or family that's been hypercritical down the line, and that is that kind of voice now that speaks to you when you feel like you're finally getting ahead, or you feel like you're finally feeling good about where you're at or where you're headed. That little voice that comes in and says, oh, you're going to screw this up, something like that. You feel that kind of a thing creeping in. Great to be emotionally honest with yourself about that and try to nip it in the bud as you can. Or at the very least, maybe even be honest with others around you about that. Maybe try not to overcompensate for that by leaning in. That's where that kind of overinflated ego can come in, or that overconfidence that can come in with that Jupiter and Leo up in the 10th house. So try not to do that. Maybe even be honest with superiors or those around you about doubts or things that kind of creep in. That's a very human thing. Better to be, I think, honest about that rather than trying to overcompensate for it. What I'm talking about right now is Pluto, and I didn't mention that. So we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about this Pluto, which is opposite to that Jupiter. And this is a dynamic tension between these two. And they'll be reinforcing each other in some ways, but they'll also be conflicting with each other. So Pluto itself speaks to matters of power, transformation, regeneration, depth, a need for surrender, deep change, purging, a need to face the shadow. But all of this can be extraordinarily empowering to work with all of these energies, again, especially from a place of emotional honesty and a willingness to go through that kind of death and rebirth process. Now, this is in your 4th house, which speaks to the opposite aspects of life as the 10th house. This is your private life. It's your home. It's your family. It's your roots. It's your core. It's where you go to be by yourself and to process the day, even in terms of looking at the clock. If the top of the chart where Jupiter is up here is around noon, then this is right in the middle of the night, those like 3 a.m. thoughts that come through. So this can be deeply private. And there may be some major processing around what you're experiencing in your public life that you're needing to work through. So again, you may be triggering yourself. You may be triggering your own shadow through the success that you're having. If that's the case, again, honesty, being open with yourself, being willing to process the shadow, to face that shadow, to look at it for what it is, to transform and transmute that energy into, hey, Aquarius, I'm a human being. It's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to have some fears as long as we're not letting those completely take over, as long as we're not allowing for those to undermine our success any more than necessary. So there's this kind of rebirth that's requested from Pluto in your 4th house. And keep in mind, this is a very long-term transit, and it's likely to have varying levels of potency throughout that whole period of time. The opposition to Jupiter that we're experiencing in this coming year, I would say for the whole year, the whole sign opposition, as long as Jupiter is up in Leo, it's likely to heighten the influence of this. Additionally, the fact that we have the eclipses coming through here, especially the North Node, is going to be coming through here and heightening the influence of this. So you are getting front-loaded some of the bigger aspects of what this Pluto transit's going to mean for you. So accepting the fact that rebirth around your personal roots, your family, your ancestry, those family patterns that are in place, those things that you've inherited that we spoke about as well, the internal world. There's going to be a lot of purging, processing, allowing for that deep change to be experienced in this coming year. So try not to turn your face away from that. Try not to not look at that. It's when we try to avoid what Pluto is trying to transform or transmute for us that things start to get complicated and that we can start to run into those self-sabotage things. Again, that's where overcompensation can come in this picture here. So if you do find yourself overcompensating, ask yourself, is there some transformation that I'm meant to be going through, some regeneration of who I am at my core that I'm trying to ignore for fear of it checking any sort of ego attachments that I may have around performance and things like that. Additionally, this is likely to be bringing up those generational power dynamics or emotional patterns. A lot of that is probably going to speak to matters of your family. You may encounter, quite literally, power and control dynamics with family members. So like I said, there could be a family member that's triggered and trying to undercut the success that you're experiencing. Maybe they are trying to infuse a little bit of doubt here and there. Maybe they're trying to keep you small so that they can feel safe, so that they feel like you're not outgrowing them, or so that they don't feel like they're a failure because, well, if you're capable of this, then maybe they should have been, or something like this. Watch out for those little things. Try to release when you do encounter those things. There can be that kind of exposure of truth that winds up kind of creeping through, and Pluto will try and point those things out to you. It is a bit of an ally there. If there's any weird power dynamics in your family, it will be helping to bring that to your attention. And ultimately, that transformation, that death and rebirth cycle that is occurring in this area, it's trying to help you to rebuild on a more solid foundation, your sense of inner safety, your sense of inner confidence through integrating your shadow. Like I said, with Aquarius here, focusing on you're a human being, you don't have to be perfect. You're allowed to be quirky. You're allowed to have little idiosyncrasies, and being emotionally honest with yourself about the fact that you're not perfect and that's okay, and to allow for that to be your foundation. Additionally, some really deep subconscious drives and desires may be revealed to you, especially if this is a year of a lot of pushing, a lot of ambition, a lot of really going after what you aspire to be. Try to pay attention if there are little flags that pop up about, hey, you're trying to prove something to a family member. Maybe that drive, that desire comes from a sense of that you need to be something out in the world, because if you were to just be yourself, that would somehow not be enough, or something like this. So what does that drive come from? Where do your desires, what are they rooted in? What are your motivations? And emotional honesty is going to be the name of the game when it comes to all of this. There can be a sense of really intense purification and renewal around your family ties, but there's also an opportunity to, again, reclaim that inner power, that autonomy over yourself. You can break those patterns. Both Uranus and Pluto are going to be helping with any sort of patterns where you may hold yourself back, or you may have some self-limiting beliefs or things like this that maybe you've inherited. And there's a huge opportunity for really deep healing, as well as channeling that drive, channeling your willpower, channeling your instinctive kind of ambition and things like this toward success. So you can really push yourself strongly this year to achieve, which is wonderful. Again, especially with the alignments of Neptune and Jupiter, where I feel like you should be pretty clear about what does your ideal public life look like. But look for where that might be a bit obsessive, or look for where that may be rooted in any sort of inadequacy or things like that. So being really honest with yourself. Also, any sort of power struggles in the workplace. I think I half said and then distracted myself. Beyond family trying to undercut you, this may just speak to that your success is triggering people at times. So try to pay attention if someone seems to be trying to undercut you. Look at maybe what are some of the psychological dynamics that's going on with them. And that could then prevent you from feeling the need to overcompensate or prove them wrong or something like that. It's coming from a place of weakness in other people when they're trying to undercut you 100% of the time. And yeah, ultimately, at your core, This is a sense of purification, empowerment, individuation that this Pluto is really encouraging here. So beware of clinging to the past, unconsciously repeating those ancestral control patterns, white knuckling situations, not allowing, like not surrendering or resisting change, because that Pluto does also call for that change. So this can also point to a move that you may be making. Now, again, this is going to be here for 20 years. There are going to be eclipses. When you get those eclipses in your 4th and 10th houses, that axis there, that does really highly emphasize the likelihood of a move or some big renovation or big change to your home. People moving away, people moving in. Maybe this is a family shift. Maybe you have some parents moving in with you, things like that. If that's the case, again, keeping a little bit of an eye on the power dynamics there and the statements made and things like that. But that can also definitely be a thing. There may be something about renovating your literal home as well that comes through with this. So let's briefly talk about, we're wrapping up some lunar eclipse cycles in Pisces and Virgo. That's been ongoing since 2024. So you've been having some eclipse themes, some shifts, some changes, some significant pivotal moments with regard to your creativity, your individuality, your autonomy, what you really enjoy, your own personal pleasures, your own personal spirit versus your social roles, your social responsibilities, the social expectations placed upon you, your aspirations, your dreams, your vision of your lifestyle and how you want for that to be. So that's all been highlighted quite a bit. This may have brought in some new social groups that you belong to. This may have brought in some new hobbies or interests that you've been pursuing. What's interesting is maybe there's, because of the fact that some of those eclipses have coincided with Saturn and Neptune being in your 5th house as well, along with those eclipses, maybe there is a craft or a creative pursuit or something like that, a passion that you're wanting to bring into a routine. Maybe you're wanting to monetize it, basically. Maybe you're wanting to introduce some independent work or a side hustle or something like that. Those eclipses should be supportive of that. And it might even put you in touch with some people who are able to help along those lines in terms of the groups that you belong to. I do tend to emphasize, though, with the 5th, 11th axis, social responsibilities are important, and being around like-minded people can be wonderful, but try not to box yourself in based on the expectations of other people around what it is that you should truly enjoy. Only you can decide what truly pleases you in the 5th house there. So those kinds of themes are likely to come up perhaps a bit quietly, perhaps around some culminations, some quiet closure, some new roles that seem to be cropping up, some new interests that seem to be reinforced, things like this as we're wrapping up that cycle. Now we're stepping into the Aquarius and Leo eclipses cycle that's going to be taking place across your 4th and 10th house axis. So the North Node will be in Aquarius, which is going to be encouraging growth through emotional authenticity, family grounding. It's calling you toward that Pluto, toward that regeneration, that death and rebirth cycle around the 4th house. Now, this can speak to closing out certain family connections or, again, patterns, things like this. Maybe you're moving away from home. Maybe the power dynamics within your family are shifting, and you're being encouraged to embrace those changes and to embrace them as, this is opening new doors for me. This is where I can experience growth. There may even be, with Pluto and the North Node eclipses in this place, some encouragement for you to feel like you belong. But beyond social roles, you belong in the world, in your own life. So not seeking that necessarily external validation fundamentally. Yes, that's going to be there, but not over-relying upon that for a sense of belonging or a sense of status or a sense of satisfaction. So the South Node, which speaks to some things that maybe we're over-reliant upon and maybe we need to not overemphasize in our lives because it's something that is kind of a given. That's going to be moving into your 10th house and emphasizing that Jupiter there. Now, it will be emphasizing some of the things that I mentioned around the excess, that can come in, the shadow aspect of that Jupiter there. And it's going to encourage you to not go too hard in that direction of the shadow aspects. So that is where we need to potentially release some over-identification with status. Be ambitious, certainly. Try not to step on people to get to where you're trying to go. Try not to violate your own sense of ethics and morality and integrity to get ahead. Try to integrate your individuality, your ability to show up and shine with that collective good that you're working with teams on. Remember how I was mentioning how you're able to show up really well because you're able to be very supportive of people, very optimistic, and inspire people. So leaning into that aspect there. And that South Node is also going to be pointing out that there may be some over-attachment to status or to that external validation. What it's saying there is not give that up or don't do that. It's saying you've got this. Don't fret it. Focus on cleaning out the basement, basically. Focus on making sure that you're being emotionally authentic and that you feel like you belong as you, yourself, and that you're, again, allowed to be a human being and you're allowed to go through some emotional processing and to prioritize that as well. If you don't want to be where you are, maybe you don't want to stay there just because that's where your status is. Things like this. Now, that's also going to be re-emphasizing the potential for some drama. So I would really try to avoid any sort of ego versus like group conflict things coming up, drama around status, recognition, loyalty, things like that. Releasing any sort of need for like performative validation that, or getting triggered by the success of other people. Try not to be too envious, things like that. Really try to cultivate true expression in this year with these eclipses, reinforcing that opposition between Pluto and Jupiter there. But yeah, I think that that is pretty much what I have for you, Scorpio, for 2026. So I really hope that this was helpful. If it was, and you don't mind giving it a like or hype, I would really greatly appreciate that. Helps out so much. And if you would like a personalized year ahead reading tailored to your entire natal chart and placements, I do offer that at Sociastrology.com, where we utilize all sorts of timing techniques. And there's also information in the description box below for memberships, where we have lectures each month and there's weekly forecasts and things like that if you would like to join. And do consider sticking around by subscribing. Here we tend to look at major alignments and transits, and we'll look at them weekly from a global/geopolitical perspective of how they're impacting the collective energies, and also how they're impacting us personally based on our sun and rising sign like we've done here. So if that is of interest to you, I would love to have you here for future videos. And again, I hope you have an absolutely beautiful 2026, and thank you so much for spending this time with me.